It used to be a real big deal back when we worked in AutoCAD in DOS, and your processor just took a long time to generate on your screen all of these lines that you had. You would turn things off or just freeze them instead because it just handled it differently. It didn't process them even though they weren't there. Well, that's not as much of a case now. Our big processors with our tons of RAM in them can handle these things. And ever since Paperspace was introduced way back in AutoCAD 11, we're on version I think 28 or 29 now with 2013, the freezing gave you more options in the viewports, and we'll talk about those. In a layout or in Paperspace, which is down on the tab down here, this is a viewport. And in this viewport, you can double click and that will activate it. Do a zoom extents and you can see your object right here. If I zoom or pan, move around, I can see what's going on. Now in this viewport or any viewport, I can freeze layers individually. So that means I can freeze them so that I can't see them in this viewport at all. But if I have another viewport, they'll stay there. Let me show you. If I copy this viewport, I didn't copy the line work. I only have one set of line work. This viewport is a window to what's in model space. When I make changes to my objects in model space, for example, like deleting this door, that's reflected in my viewports. See, there's no door here, there's no door there. I can double click in either one of these viewports, and now what I do to the line work, if I delete it, move it, or etc., then it'll show up over here as well. So I can select this door. As you can see, it's been picked here, delete, it's gone in both places. Now let's say I don't want to see the doors at all. I can go up to my freeze button, select the door, and now they're frozen in this viewport, but not in this one. That's where freezing comes into play. Now if I go to model space and I freeze them here, let's say I freeze the walls. Can't see the walls, they're still there, I just can't see them. They're frozen everywhere. What you do in model space gets reflected back into Paperspace, so you have to be careful. So now I have to come back, go to one of my layers. I can go to the layer manager, or I can go to this pull down right here, pick the button, and it will thaw my layers. So that's something else you can do here besides picking the current one. I can lock them, I can unlock them, I can freeze them, I can turn them off. So now you'll see here when I go back to my layout 1 tab, everything's back on. But if I click the freeze button, pick the walls, my walls and doors are frozen. You can't see them here, but I can see them here. Now that's really cool. That gives you a lot of different options. So I can display my drawing differently by controlling them with layers. If I didn't use the layers to control the way they looked, I couldn't do this. So that's very important. So you saw when the wall layer was locked and how it hovered over there, I couldn't select it. Let's lock them back. It fades them back a little bit. But now I can pick them, but I can't do anything with it. I can't move them. I can pick them to begin with, but then I can't use a command on them. Then if I start a command, I can't pick them. So these walls are safe. I can't get rid of them. That's nice. Now, if you find that you don't like this fading back, which I personally don't like either, there are a couple things you can do with that. You can come up here, I can turn that feature off altogether. See, so now I still can't delete these objects, but that's okay. Or if I turn it back on, I can decrease the amount of fadedness, so to speak. Whatever floats your boat. I personally just prefer leaving it turned off. The locked layers, even though they're faded back, will still print normally. That won't affect it at all. That's just a visual representation or a visual cue to let you know that the layer is locked. You can also see it by hovering over the object and you get that little padlock of an icon that shows up in your crosshairs. That'll tell you too. One last thing. If I'm in a viewport or just in Paperspace in general, if I want to turn off, not freeze of the time you're drawing, you won't have a layer you need or want to use. That happens. To eliminate this issue, I recommend that you start every new drawing with a template file. That'll have most of your common layers already in it that you're going to use. Just maintain that template file, keep it up to date, and when you develop or make new layers, make sure you include it in there, especially if it's one you feel that you're going to use often. But regardless of how you started your file, you're still going to need to make a new layer from time to time. That process is actually quite simple. Open up the layer manager, type in LA on the command line. That's the easiest way to do it, or just leave it open all the time. If you have more than one screen, which is the way I do my work every day, I have multiple screens. I keep my layer manager open all the time. I never close it. That's how often you're going to be working in your layer manager. If nothing else, it helps to make something current. I can just scroll through my list, double click, and there you go. So that one's current. But to make a new layer, it's actually quite simple. The easiest way is to start with a layer that has the most objects or settings in common with what you want to do. Just click on this icon right here to make a new layer, or press Alt plus N. We'll give it a name called Layer 1. If you already have a Layer 1, it'll call it Layer 2. If you have a Layer 2, it'll call it Layer 3, etc. Now you can see that it copied all the settings from my Windows layer. Very simple, and that's great. Now, a lot of your layers are going to have the exact same settings. That's okay. You don't have to change them. Just do what you need to do. That's done, having different layers with the exact same settings on it, because they're going to be used to organize different types of objects. So this is called Windows. Maybe my new layer is called Windows-Bay, because we're going to put in some bay windows, and we want them on their own layer. But we want them to print the same, with the same color, the same continuous line type, the same line weight, same transparency, etc. That's going to happen all the time. In fact, you're going to use a lot of the same line weights. The colors will typically just be used to help you differentiate visually what the objects are on your screen. You can also print directly to those colors, but most of the time you're probably just going to print to the color black, and that's okay too. When you create your new layer, you can do it however you need to. If it's selected in here, and taking over some of these settings, or you can just create one and then change everything all that you want. It's very easy to make a new layer, and to edit them, it's just as easy. So once you've created it, you can click on the color, change it to green, or whatever color you want, change it to a different line type, different thickness, click OK. Editing a layer is very easy, and you can edit multiple layers at the same time. If you hold down the Control button, you can click on as many layers as you want, or if you click on one, hold down the Shift key, and it will pick every layer between the two layers that you selected. Once they're all selected, you can make the changes to all of them at the same time, and it will apply your change to all of those layers. There you go. Just pick one layer again. Remember, when you're picking the layers, pick them over here in the name or in the status. Otherwise, if I pick over here, it's going to open up my color change, and that's what it's going to want. If you only need to edit the color of one layer, then that's fine. Click it, change the color, and there you go. That's a quick way, and it reduces or eliminates one step of picking again, picking, or I can just go one click, two click, three click. So it's going to take off one or two clicks. But that's all you have to do to create a new layer or to edit a layer. Perhaps one of the biggest issues when creating drawings on a computer is making sure they turn out the way you want them to on paper. That is where good layer management and layer use comes in. The purpose of layers is to organize the data in your file so that you can work with it, and so that it has a correct visual display on paper, not just the screen. Because who cares ultimately what it looks like on the screen? That's not what you're giving your client. You're giving your client the drawings. Yeah, okay, sometimes the CAD issues when creating drawings on a computer is making sure they turn out the way you want them to on paper. That is where good layer management and layer use comes in. The purpose of layers is to organize the data in your file so that you can work with it, and so that it has a correct visual display on paper, not just the screen. Because who cares ultimately what it looks like on the screen? That's not what you're giving your client. You're giving your client the drawings. Yeah, okay, sometimes a CAD file goes along with it, but the drawing is where you make your money, so it needs to be correct. Layers control how an object looks, but you can override a layer settings on any object by assigning that object a color, line type, line weight, transparency, etc. Well, don't do this. I would love to tell you to never, ever, ever do this, but there will be a rare occasion when it's appropriate. But they're extremely rare. The 3 keys to good object visual display management in AutoCAD are 1, by layer, number 2, by layer, and number 3, by layer. Every object can be either assigned its properties individually or it can be assigned by layer. The 3 main display properties an object can have or set to are color, line weight, and line type. Each layer can have all of these properties set as well. And transparency is another one if you use that. It's a good practice to keep all of your objects set to by layer. That allows you to control them in your viewports. Viewports are windows in paper space that look at model space. We've kind of looked at this already, but I want to go over it one more time. In this file, go to the paper space tab named Layout 1, and I'm in the Architectural Example Imperial Drawing file. Open up the Layer Manager, type L8 on the command line. That'll take you right to it. Now, if you make changes here, then the changes are made everywhere. We only want to change the objects, though, in a specific part of our drawing. We can make a detailed view of any part of our window here, of one of our doors, or a combination of a wall joint or anything. And so sometimes, though, you want to make other things faded back or to be dashed or not shown at all. And that's okay. You don't want to have to make a new file for all of that. You can do that right here. To do that, you have to edit the layers while in an activated viewport. Since these are all drawn to by layer, we can make the change here. Double-click in your viewport. Make sure it's locked. Click on the button here. If it looks like this, a yellow unlocked lock, that means you can mess things up. It means I can zoom it in, pan around, and, well, it's all messed up. Well, if you find that you've done that, just undo. Then click on the button here, unlock it again. This will keep the scale right and everything. So if I double click in here, this will be my viewport. It'll be highlighted. Everything will be constrained inside that viewport. I can around and I don't affect the scale of my drawing or the view. And now I'll open up the Layer Manager. And now you're managing what's in this viewport. I have all my regular controls here, but now I have all of them once again. See, these are called, off, freeze, lock, color, line type, line weight, transparency, plot, etc. But now I have viewport freeze, viewport color, viewport line type, viewport line weight, etc. They're the exact same things, and they work the exact same way, and they're changed the exact same way as before. But only now, I can change my walls in this viewport alone to, let's go with a pink color. See, they're pink here. If I double click outside the viewport, I close my Layer Manager so it's out of the way. You can see I made them pink here, and that's only in this viewport. If I go back to model space, see, there's still this ugly brown color. Who wants brown walls anyway? But I can do that. If I copy this viewport, it takes on the same settings as in this viewport. So if I double click inside it to activate it, open up my Layer Manager, I can scroll across here and change my walls to any other color. I don't change the line work at all. I just change the way it's set to in the layer. I'm controlling the visual display of these layers so that I can show it differently. Now, why would I want to change the color? Well, maybe I need it to print differently, in in green instead of in pink. Or maybe I'm using what's called a CTB file to control my line weight, and not the layer manager. And green prints out lighter and I need that to be faded back. That's another option or another reason to do it. If I unlock this and I zoom in to right here to make a detail of some sort, lock it back so that I can zoom in and pan around. Now I can work in here. Since these are different colors, I don't have to change the line work at all. I can just leave it the same and just display it in a different way. And when I go to print this out, it'll look different. And I can make more drawings from one set of line work much easier, much more quickly, and without messing up my original work. Chapter project for Chapter 9. In this chapter, we've learned how layers can be used to manage the visual display features of a drawing. In this chapter project, we're going to create a new template file with a set of layers that we're going to use for a future project. So that's really important. We're starting off the first chapter project that we're going to be using later on. So make sure you do it right, or else you're going to pay for it later on. I'm joking with you, giving you a hard time. I've included a copy of this file that we're going to create in here. So when you make yours, you can open up the one I've done so that you can compare it. And I'll do that with a lot of the other chapter projects from this point on. So if you make a mistake, that's okay. Go back, rewatch this video, and redo it and see what happens. So to start off, we need to make a new file. We're going to open up a DWT file that comes with AUTO-CAD. So you should have it. It should be working okay for you. If not, I'll make sure that it's included in this chapter file so that you can work with it. So let's type in new. Click open, and that will open up your select template window. Now we want to use the tutorial-iarc.dwt file. Now this is an architectural file because we're going to be making an architectural drawing for our final project. And this is going to be the base file that we're going to start with. We're going to set it up. So we're making a new drawing. We're going to start with this template file and click open. This will bring you to a paper space tab called D-size. It's an architectural D-size drawing. It has a pretty generic title block in here already, and it has a viewport set up and some other layers and styles and things set up that we're going to need. So you can just stay right in here. What's the first thing you do when you start a new file? That's right, save. So if you want to make a chapter folder to save your drawings in, you can. That's fantastic. Or if you're saving everything to your Autodesk 360 cloud, then that's a great idea too, maybe even better. Click save, put it wherever you're gonna want to put it, on your Autodesk 360 cloud, some other folder somewhere, thumb drive, jump drive type thing or whatever. But I'm going to save it right here so that you guys will be able to have it when you get the videos. I'm going to name the file project template. And I'm not going to make it a DWT file because it really isn't in this case. This is going to be the start of our project that we're going to use. But feel free to save it as a DWT file so that you can make a new file later on from it. And this can be the basis of your template files from now on. Click save, and here you go. So now we see that it's saved. And what we're going to do is be able to set up some layers. So type in LA for Layer Manager. Now this template file already has several layers already built into it for us. So that's fantastic. But me, I'm kind of picky. I don't like all of these. Some of them I'm going to want you to change, and I'm going to need you to create some new layers because we have other needs for what we're going to be drawing that aren't addressed here. Now there are a lot of different standards and conventions for creating layers. If you work in the United States, here we have something called the NCS, or the National CAD Standards. And that's just one of many. So you can follow along with what I'm going to do here. You can make your own, but I suggest you follow along for the case of the tutorials for what we're doing. The important part in naming layers is that you and your company create a standard so that when you work together, you know what's what. It's all about organizing and managing and working together. So when you create a system, and whatever system that is, as long as you're all working with that same system, you can all work together much more easily. what we're going to do is create a couple of layers and change some. Now there's one in here called dimensions. It's right here. Let's change that one. We're going to change the color. I don't want it to be red. We're going to use green. Click OK. Now that one's green. Now there's a wall layer here, but I want it to be named something different. So you can right click on this and select rename layer, or you can just press the F2 button. Click in the box and we'll keep it A-walls, but call it dash exterior. Press enter. Now we have a new layer called A-walls dash exterior. Now I also want to make another one, a brand new one, and we want it to look a lot like this. We're going to call it A-walls dash hatch. One difference though is we're going to change the color. So pick on the color and we're going to use color 8, sort of a grayish faded back color a little bit. Now I want an interior wall layer. All right, so let's make another new one. Let's pick this line for the exterior because we're going to make it very similar to it. Type in A-wall-interior. And this time we're going to make the color blue. Now there's a door layer. I want that color to be yellow. I need a window layer, which we have, and I want to change that to color 30. So just come down here and type in 30. When you know what the number is, it's much easier to type it in than to move around and try to find exactly where color 30 is. Well, there it is right there. Click OK. Now I want a chair layer. I want that color to be magenta, and I want it to be a continuous line type. So this text layer right here matches that perfectly. So pick it and now select new. Type in chair, enter, and that one's done, nice and easy. Now we need a text layer, which we have, and I want that color to be white, which is number 7. Now you can type in here number 7, or you can type in the color white, and it'll be the same thing. Now we need 2 more layers, a plant layer and a footing layer. The plant layer is going to be red and continuous. We don't have one of those, so call it plant. It's continuous, and I want it to be red. Click OK. And one more layer to create a footing layer. This layer will have our footing on it for our building. And I want that one to be the color 8. And I want a different line type. I don't want it to be continuous. I want it to be hidden. We don't have hidden on here, so hit load. You can hit the letter H and it will take you down to the line types that start with the letter H. So pick hidden, click OK. Now it's an option for us, and we select hidden. Now one last thing is a viewport. I want to change the viewport layer to a no print layer, which is right here. Click that one, and now we're set. So now we have several layers that are in our file that we're going to be able to use, and we've tweaked them a little bit and added some more to it. Now, when you're done with this, you can close the layer manager or not, but make sure you save your work, because I would hate for you to have to go through all of that again. Congratulations, you just started your work on your final project. What is a drawing without dimensions? Just a bunch of lines, I guess, but dimensioning a drawing properly is essential. There are many tools in AutoCAD to help us annotate our drawings. Dimensioning is the process of adding measurement annotation to a drawing. Let's open up the dimensions example drawing. You can create dimensions for a variety of object types in many orientations. Linear dimensions can be horizontal, vertical, aligned, rotated, a baseline, or a continued dimension, which is a chained dimension. Dimensions can be associative, non-associative, or exploded. Associative dimensions adjust to changes in the geometric objects that they measure. I recommend that you always use associated dimensions, especially if you are placing your dimensions in paper space. I'll show you some examples here. These dimensions here that I'm selecting have been done in Paperspace. Dimension associativity defines the relationship between your objects and the dimension object. There are three types of associativity between geometric objects and dimensions. Now, this gets kind of technical here, and I apologize for that, but it's important to know the difference because when you run into drawings that aren't using these features, it can be difficult to work with dimensions. Associative dimensions automatically adjust their locations, their orientations, and measurement values when the geometric objects associated with them are modified. So your dimension will follow the line. Dimensions in a layout may be associated to objects in model space. The dim associate system variable, DIMASSOC, should be set to 2. There are 3 settings for this system variable: 0, which is off, 1, and 2. When it's set to 2, the dimensions will follow the line work. So if you shorten a line, your dimension will move accordingly and will automatically be updated. A non-associative dimension, which is set to 1, will not change when the geometric objects are modified. And if it's set to 0, then it's an exploded dimension. That means that it's just a collection of separate objects, like a line or text, a block for the arrowhead, etc. It's not a dimension object. Therefore, if you want to edit that dimension, you have to delete each individual piece and recreate it, or move each piece as if it were line work. Dimensions have several distinct elements to them. They have their text, dimension lines, arrowheads, and extension lines. All of these can be controlled, defined, and altered through the dimension styles or through the properties manager. Let's go to this No Dim tab. Just click on it. It's the same line work as in the Dimension tab here and in the Styles tab here, only there are no dimensions. Creating a dimension is actually very simple. There are several ways where you can get to the different dimensions. If you're on the Home tab in the ribbon, you can go to the Annotation panel. The Annotation panel is sort of a short and condensed version of the Annotate tab. You can create dimensions right here. Click on the flyout arrow, and you have a linear dimension, which will lock the dimension in a horizontal or vertical orientation. Essentially, it will give you your X or Y distance. The aligned dimension will give you the distance between 2 points, regardless of angle. The angular dimension will give you the angle of your objects. You can do an arc length, a radius, the diameter, an ordinate point, and you can jog your dimension as well, especially on a radius. So in order to create any of these, just pick one. We'll start with the aligned. Now, when you dimension, you want to make sure you're using your O-snaps, especially if you're dimensioning in Paperspace. So turn on your O-snaps, or you can always type in endpoint. Let's pick down here, type in end again, click up here, and there you go. This is 100 feet long. This is a pretty big piece of steel or wood or something here. But that's okay. The units really right now are not as important. We'll go over how to set units and dimensions later. But that's it. You pick 2 points. Pick another point and your second, and then you pick your point where you want your dimension to be shown. It's really that simple. Now let's try a radius. You can only put a radius or a diameter on an arc or a circle. Obviously, a line doesn't have a radius. So you just pick. And while you're putting your dimensions in, you can use your scroll wheel on your mouse to zoom in or out. Click and hold it to pan around. And just place your dimension wherever you want it to be. And that's it. Dimensions are quite simple to put in once you have everything set up the way you want them. You start your dimension command, pick your first point, pick your second point, and then pick your location. Editing dimensions, though, can be a bit tricky. If you want to edit text, You can either type in ED, press enter, and then select your text. Press escape to get out, or you can double click the dimension. Of course, here I missed and went to paper space. If that happens, come down here to the bottom and click on this model button. If that model button isn't there, then scroll out and double click somewhere out here. And as you see, it can be tricky. That's okay. That's why we have the ED or edit command. Now to edit the text, you just type in whatever it is you want it to be. It works just like your text editor. You have a lot of different options up here, and you can even delete the text that is the actual dimension. When you're finished, just click outside of your text somewhere. If you want your dimension back, use the less than and then the greater than. And you can see the actual dimension or the actual measured dimension is highlighted. That's how you'll know that someone just didn't type in the number, which you can do. It'll show up the same way here in your drawing, but when you're in the text editor, it will be highlighted, letting you know that someone just hasn't overridden the dimension. So that's it in a nutshell. We're going to look at different things in different ways and in more detail here in the next few sections. Just as the display features of objects are controlled by layers, dimension styles control the display features of dimensions. Dim styles also control various dimension settings. There are over 300 settings and system variables for dimensions. We won't touch all of them, thank goodness, but there are a lot that we will touch. Styles help you control and manage these dimensions. Let's open up the dimension example file again. Go to the Styles tab. That's right down here. Several dimensions here are using different styles. You can see that some of them have tick marks, some of them have smaller arrowheads, others are larger. Some text is large and red, others are green, there are no extension lines, etc. It's easy to change the style of a dimension. Just select the dimension and open up the Properties panel. Mine's already open, but you can press Ctrl+1 to toggle it on or off. When you come here, you can see a lot of the different properties of the dimension. It tells you the dimension type. This is a rotated dimension, which is just one of your linear dimensions. It gives you the general settings, just like any other object, your color, your layer, your line type, etc. The miscellaneous section here tells you if it's annotative or not, or if it's of what particular dimension style or dim style. Pick in the box and you'll see an arrow come up. You can pick the arrow again to get a list of possible dimension styles that are in your file. As you move across the list and highlight one without clicking, you get a preview of your dimension of what it's going to look like if you pick that style. Watch over here on my right. If we go to bold, that's what it looks like. Civil, which is the one we currently have set. No extensions, standard, or tick. You can tell that the civil is the one we have set because it shows the grips. So find the one you want and select it. And that's how you change the style. Very simple, very easy. If the dimension has been exploded, for example, like this one here, all it is a bunch of lines. Piece of text, and in this case, a block for the tick mark. The dimension style no longer has any effect on this whatsoever, so I can't update it, not as easily as I can all of these. You see, I can select multiple dimension objects and go to the dimension style and update all of them to bold. That's why you use associative dimensions that we talked about in the last section. Once exploded, it's just a line. I can't do anything with it. If you go to the Annotate tab on the ribbon, you'll see here you have all of your annotation tools: text, dimensions, leaders, tables, markups, and annotation scales. The dimension panel is very similar to the Annotate panel, except here it also has text in your dimensions, your leaders, etc. You have more tools available to you here, and we'll go over these in another section. But here you can click, and this will activate your dimension style. Right now we're set to civil. If we switch it to bold, any dimension that we create now will be used or drawn in the bold dimension style. So if we click here and activate the civil style and we dimension, you'll see that your dimensioning the exact same line, but the style looks different. We can change it again and dimension it one more time, and it looks different yet again. So that's what styles will do for you. Now, controlling them can be a bit tricky and a bit extensive, so we'll break it down and look at a few things here and there. But the styles are changed and created in the Dimension Style Manager, which you can get to by clicking on this little arrow. All of these annotation tools have this feature. This is the Dimension Style Manager. Here we have a list of the different dimension styles in our file, and you get a little preview. When you select one, you kind of see what it is. Has a description, tells you a little bit about it, why it's different, why it's unique. And here you can make some modifications to it, create a new one, etc. You can set one to current here as well. And it tells you right here what your current dimension style is. It's civil. If we want to change any of these, we click on the Modify button once we've selected the style we want to change. And you can see here there are several different tabs, and each tab has a lot of different settings. The nice thing is, though, you get a little preview of what it's going to look like. The Lines tab controls the way our dimension lines are displayed, or if they're even displayed at all. You can set it to a specific color, and I suggest you use either by block or by layer. Same thing with the line type or the line weight. These settings here will override anything that is controlled by your layer. So if your layer is set to a color of green, but you want it to be red, regardless of the layer settings, you can set it that way, and it shows here. You can do the same thing with your line type. You can make it hidden, and you can change the line weight, making it very thick or very thin. Now you have baseline spacing, which controls how far the dimension is away from the baseline. Now, I'm not going to go in detail of every little setting here because you really don't need to know everything right now, but you can always go through these and play with the settings. Now you can suppress your baselines or your dimension line, and it's done in halves. Why? I'm not really sure. I've always had to draw all of it. But there are times when you want to have a little dimension that looks like this, and you don't want to show the other side. So that's a special case. When it's okay to make a special case dimension style, that's why we have them. Now, if we look at the text, you're going to find out that the lines, symbols and arrows, and text will be the three main tabs where you'll make changes at. Now, your text style works similarly to the lines. You can pick your style of text, and text objects will have styles just like the dimensions have styles. And we'll talk about text styles in another section. But if you want, you can change that. You can set up a dimension text style so that your dimensions will be controlled by that text style. You can set the color here by layer or by block, or you can make it magenta if you'd like. You can set up a fill color. Now the fill color puts an area behind the text. As you can see here, this makes it a little bit hard to read, but you can also use a background. Well, the background is kind of cool because what that does, it just blends in the background color, which is typically going to be like a white or a black. When you print out your drawing, it will match the background of the physical paper that you're on. Well, how does it do that? Well, it just doesn't print anything in that area. So that's cool because if you have line work underneath your text and your dimension, it will block out the line work and show only the text, clearing it up and keeping you from having to trim lines or mess around with your dimensions so you can see them. So that's something you may want to consider doing almost every time. You can set the text height, or the text height can be controlled by the text style, whatever you want to do. You can put a frame around it or not. You can align everything horizontally or with a dimension. You can center it. You can put it over an extension line. You can do a lot of different things. You'll just have to play with these settings until it comes out the way you want it to look. Now, the other one you're going to want to look at will be the primary units. This is very important because your dimensions will show somebody how big or how large that your item is that you're creating. You have same type of settings that you do in your unit settings for your file. Now, these typically need to match, but it's up to you. You can do it however you need to. You can make them architectural, and you can change your precision on how precise your dimensions are going to be. You can change your fractional stacking. You can add a prefix. I'll put in my initials. You can add a suffix, and it will have for architectural, a feet or inches, or if you're using decimal specifically, you're probably going to want to set this in if you're measuring in feet, or if you're dimensioning in millimeters, you want to set it to millimeters. When you make changes to your dimension style and you've used that dimension style in your drawing, then those dimension styles will automatically be updated once you change their style. Now that's pretty cool because then you can make quick changes to your entire drawing quickly. You can also use the match properties, type in MA and pick your source and then pick the target. And those styles will be applied to those other dimensions. We're going to take a look at some more advanced dimensioning tools. We're also going to take a look at some ways in which you can edit dimensions. First of all, let's open up a file that has some. Go to the dimension example file, open it up. Now here we don't have any dimensions. Let's create some very quickly. We'll just use the angular dimension. Pick your first point, and then pick a second. Place it. Now you can right-click to start the exact same command again. Pick your 2 points, and there you go. Okay, so you can see adding dimensions is actually quite simple. Just find the dimension type that you want to create and pick your points. Now you can also dimension out in outer space, I guess. You don't have to pick anything. If you do, though, it's kind of pointless, but wherever you pick, that's where the dimension is going to go. Now you notice that this says 100 feet. Now if I were to click up here, in approximately the same distance, see, well, why is this 100 feet and this is 2.47 feet? Let's erase that to get it out of the way. Well, that's because when I used my O snaps, it snapped to the line work that's in my model. Here, I'm snapping to nothing, so it's picking the paper size length. So when we print this out, this line is going to be about 2.5 inches long. So it's at a scale right now. And that's one thing to keep in mind. If your dimensions don't look right, maybe your O snaps were turned off. Press F3 to toggle them off or on. You can type in OS to get to your drafting settings, and you can set up your running O snaps however you want to. Now let's say you want to make changes to your dimensions. You can do that. Open up the Properties panel by pressing Ctrl and 1 at the same time. Now, select one of the dimensions. Let's pick this one here. Now we can change the color of it. We can override it. Now if we do this though, remember everything you do here is going to override what's done in the Layer Manager. It's also going to override what's done in your dimension styles. So keep that in mind. We'll keep it at the civil style because I want to show you some things that are going to happen. Now here you can change your arrow types. Just select the box and pick the arrow. And there are a lot of different arrow types that you can pick. Let's go with a small dot. Now what's cool is I can set one arrow to be one thing, and I can set the other arrow to be something else. You may need that to happen. That's up to you. But let's make them both the small dots. We can even change the arrow size right here. Those are quite large. Let's go to 0.3. We can turn off or on a dimension line. Let's keep them both on in this case. So you can change almost anything here. You can turn off or on your extension lines. Now, it has extension line 1 and extension line 2. How do you know the difference? Well, that's a great question. The first line you draw, or the first point you pick, will draw your first extension line. The second pick is the second extension line. So if I click this and I scroll back down to my extension lines, let's turn on extension line 1. That's right here. If I create another dimension over the same thing, but if we select this one and let's turn off the same extension line, which was extension line 2. Now, as you can see, the red line is missing over here on the bottom left, and on the top right, the line is missing. Well, that's because we started here for the red dimension. This is 0.1 and then 0.2. For the green, we went 0.1 and then 0.2. So you have to keep that in mind. You can have dimensions and you've gone back and forth, and so that can make it difficult if you're trying to manage your extension lines. So just keep that in mind. It's not the end of the world by any means, but just keep that in mind if it's not behaving the way you think it should. Now, you can change your extension lines, you can change your arrowheads, and you can also change your text. Right here, it shows you the actual measurement of the object, which is 100 units. And I can override the text right here in this box. Instead of editing the text with a text editor, I can just come right here and I can tell it whatever I want. And I can press enter or click somewhere else and it overrides my measurement. Now, if I click back in here, hit a space, and if I put in my less than and greater than sign, it'll put in the actual dimension. So that's something you can do. Now, the fit of your dimension can be a little tricky here, and there are a lot of settings that you can try. This will force a dimension line. Sometimes if something's too narrow or too short, it won't draw it, and that's up to you. You can tell it the best fit, or you can tell it to push text arrows in and out. Let me show you with a smaller dimension. We have our smaller dimension, it fits right in here. But if we select it, let's change the style to bold. Now you can see here, because the text is bigger, it automatically pushed the text outside. If we select it, we can tell it to fit the text in a different way. As you move your cursor over this, it will give you a preview of what's going on. So this will move just the text out and leave the arrowhead and dimension line in, or it'll kick everything out. It's up to you. You can force the text inside regardless of what happens, or you can move the text and add a leader. So there are a lot of different ways to edit your text, especially with the properties palette. And you can come down here, change the fit, change your units and your alternate units and your tolerances. With dimensions, you can dimension in more than one type of unit. So you can do it in inches and in millimeters at the same time, or feet and meters, etc. You can also edit your dimensions with a text editor. You can type in ED or double click on the text itself. You have your text editor up here. You can change your style. You can make something bold. You can change the font right here. You can change the justification from a middle center to like a top left. You can put in columns, symbols, etc. You have all the same formatting tools in the dimension text as you do with regular text. So I can type a really long note in here if I want to. Now, it may not make any sense to do something like that, but you can. You can move around with your arrow keys. You can even press enter to do a carriage return, and you can do that as many times as you want. And there's your text. So you can do a lot in here. You can put a full note in your dimension object. And you probably saw earlier too that you can grip edit your dimension. So let's say I went to the wrong spot. I can grab a node point. All of your associated dimensions will have a node point. The node point is this little spot here, then there is a gap, and you have your extension line. That node is the point where you're dimensioning to. And I can change that. I can make it go anywhere I need to. And I can even put it right back. So that's a handy way to make a change to a dimension. Now, sometimes things don't work out the way they should with associative dimensions. You can change the line work and they don't go with it. That does happen from time to time, and it's very frustrating. Well, you just make your grip edit here and make your changes needed. You can grip edit right at the arrowheads to reposition the height of the text. If you grip edit the text, it'll move the text. And depending on the fit settings, the text will even move the dimension line up and down with it. Like in this example where we had the leader come out, you could do something like that. So all of those dimensions that we had in our properties palette are very important to know and to realize. Find the type of settings that you need to make the types of drawings that you want to make. And don't forget about the ribbon. You can access many different tools in the ribbon, and don't forget to right click. Select your dimension and right click. And you can get to some things right here like dimension style. If you've created a dimension style and then you've edited your dimension like we did here, you can select it, right click, go to dimension style and save as a new style. Just give it a name. Click OK. And now you'll see up here, you have a new style. That's a neat trick. And that's a really cool thing to do if you're working in someone else's drawing that you've never worked in before, and they've done some really weird stuff with their dimensions, and you just can't find the right style that they've used because they've, tweaked or customized those specific dimension objects. Just right click, dimension style, and save as new style. You can also pick a style and apply it to that dimension that you've selected. If you go to other, it'll give you a lot bigger list. So select your object, right click. You can also change the precision of the dimension. So let's pick this one here. Right click, precision, 1 decimal. So that's a really cool trick. You can take away all of your style overrides, and while that also removed our associativeness to the specific spots where we were at before. You can erase, and of course you can get to some of your basic editing operations that you have here available.